little less than a year ago, I told everybody in the studio, hey, I want to talk at TED. And within 3 years, I want to be at TED. So little did I know, within less than a year after I wrote it down, I would get the call to be able to come and talk at TEDx here. So it's really kind of a dream come true. And it's also a tribute to one of the kinds of things I'm going to talk to you about, the power of writing. I find so often that when I put things that I'm interested in down into writing, things start to happen. Magic starts to happen. The message that I want to get across here is really quite simple. That we all have a lot of hidden resources that once uncovered can bring a lot of magic to our lives and potentially to other people's lives in the world around us. I've got a question for you folks. How many of you consider yourself highly creative? Give me a show of hands here. Yeah, okay, and at an event like this, I would expect that. Fantastic. Fantastic. And I hope that anybody who watches this video, that they're also raising up their hands at the same time. But I have another question. Why wasn't every hand raised in this room? Because it's my belief that everyone is creative, that people are born creative, that the human being is a creative species. Have you ever seen a kid that isn't creative? I mean, really, you know how often they push the envelope, right? I mean, they are highly creative. So one of the questions becomes, how does that get covered over in our quest for maturing and specializing? How do some of those resources become hidden, and what can we do to uncouple those? I think it takes at least three things. Permission to uncover those things. Passion, the desire to find out where our passions run deepest, those passions that will help us sustain as far as we can, to take us as far as we possibly can. And persistence, to do these things frequently enough to show results. I want to focus on three things that we all do: drawing, writing, and photographing. And I'm actually going to encourage you to do it during this session. I really want to highlight that creativity isn't just for geniuses, that everyone is born creative. Every child is creative. And if we could only celebrate that and nurture that throughout our lives and reconnect with what's childlike within ourselves, not necessarily what's childish, but what's childlike, the major things can happen. Some artistic disciplines, like I just talked to you about, artistic disciplines, is drawing, writing, and photographing really just the province of the arts? In fact, all of these things are used for many other things. So I've kind of prepared you for my next question for you. How many of you can draw? Raise your hand. Excellent. Okay. Again, why isn't everybody's hand up? That's actually fantastic. I don't usually have to go through all of this. Well, what if I said sketch? Does that lower the bar a little bit? How about doodle? How many times did you doodle in the margins there? And the next time somebody says you're not paying attention, you can say, actually, no. By writing these things down, I'm increasing retention. And I'll get back to that in just a little bit. So there's a lot to that. You don't have to be Michelangelo to draw. You just have to give yourself permission to do that. There's a wonderful story related in Ted Orland and David Bale's fantastic book, Art and Fear. One of their colleagues is driving his daughter home. So, Dad, what'd you do today? Well, I taught my students how to draw. When did they forget? It's an absolutely wonderful story that gets us back to some of these resources we have with us and we just need to reclaim in our everyday lives. How many of you can write? All right, yeah, I mean, we all wrote a lot of emails last week, right? Some of them were really important. I mean, how many of us used a checklist and modified it, or even just found that one right word that made all the difference in the world? I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. So again, the point is you don't have to be Shakespeare to write. In fact, writing should just come naturally to all of us. The Zen poet Gail Schur, in her fabulous book, 4 Noble Truths for Writers, lists them. 1, writers write. 2, writing is a process. 3, you don't know what your process will be until the end. 4, if writing is your process, the only way to fail is not to write. It's a really fantastic thing where you can substitute the verb write for just about any other verb. It really is that simple. You can keep it that simple and just do it. It's helpful to be aware of the process along the way. How many of you photograph regularly? How many of you have a camera with you right now? How many of you have a cell phone with you right now that can take a photograph? Okay, more hands, right? So, actually, in this session, I want to indicate that, again, you don't have to be Ansel Adams to photograph. The Pulitzer Prize-winning images have been taken with cell phones, and they've changed political events, they've changed the world, and you can too. We have all of that before us, now more than ever with cell phone photography. And the democratic nature of this meeting with visual communication is continuing to expand at an ever-increasing rate. This is one of my primary cameras, and I don't use it professionally. I use it to spur my creativity. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. There's an ancient Chinese proverb: we hear and we forget. We see and we remember. We do and we know. John Medina, in his brilliant book, Brain Rules, backs this up with some real interesting research from recent neuroscience, that if we hear something 3 days later, we remember about 10% of it. But if we see something at the same time, we'll remember 65% of it. And that if we actually write something down, we retain 72% of it and 75% more likely to be taken action upon. Remember my little wish to speak at TED, or so many of the other things to do. So in this session, I'm going to encourage you to please take notes. There's actually a pen and paper below your seats. I know that some of you have already discovered them ahead of time. Use anything that comes to hand. And I know I'd like to encourage you to be free to doodle any of these things. Sometimes a picture is more important to mind map these things. And also, I'd like you to go ahead and turn on your cell phones during this session. I know in a session, don't turn off your cell phones, please. Well, maybe mute the ringer and turn off the flashes for this presentation. But really, it's a fantastic way of taking notes. I do it all the time. A book that I'm interested in returning to, maybe find out more about this consumer product here by sending it up to Amazon through my cell phone. Take all of these notes if you possibly can. So, I want to encourage you to give yourself the permission, as my parents did so long ago, to always be creative and have these tools on hand. When I was, you know those stories that your parents tell you to embarrass you? Or maybe celebrate you and you're not really quite sure which? Well, apparently somewhere between the ages of 1 and 2, I decided to take up murals and nearly got us kicked out of the apartment that we were renting there. So they quickly grabbed blocks of paper and put them in every room and said, here, on the paper, not on the walls. And I got it straight, and I've never stopped drawing since. And I want to celebrate that sense of permission and spontaneity to encourage us to always have the tools on hand that'll help us be a little bit more creative. Let me talk quickly a little bit of each one of these sections. Writing. What's so special about words? Well, writing excels at abstract concepts, associations, emotions. Take the word freedom. You may have an image of people raising a flag or tearing down a wall, but it's almost always coupled with words. The two have a kind of marvelous synergy, and the words are always a little bit more specific about things. Finding the right words can be so important. Let me give you an example of how words have helped me in my photography. I was down at White Sands. I photographed for an evening and a morning. I shot 24 rolls of film. Came back, edited it, found 2 keepers. One of them was a little bit more surreal, less surreal than most of the work that I do. And it was a real challenge to the kind of work that I was doing. I had to sit with it and live with it, ask a lot of questions, get feedback from other people. It wasn't until my father-in-law came in and squinted and said, "Is that water?" that I got my eureka moment. I wasn't photographing grains of sand, I was photographing the waves that were moving it across the valley floor. And when I went back the next time for the same amount of time, shot the same amount of film, same number of images, I came in with 18 keepers. I'd found my mantra which helped me achieve focus and increase my productivity. That doesn't mean that other things can't come along the way. As I was going through it, the mountain peaks that I was trying to eliminate from my field of vision to give this inland ocean, edge of the earth quality, suddenly to my mind became islands. And I found that the whole thing started to expand. It doesn't have to shut things down. When you're trying to find the right words, there's all kinds of tools, from the classic thesaurus to the new visual thesaurus that's online, and the graphic interfaces very definitely influence the way that we ingest this kind of information. It's really important to see how the tools that you use influence the process that you're going through. But when you need to come down away from conventional things and dig deeper into your own personal well of wisdom, a lot of times it helps to do some free association. And it's not just for the therapist, it's for everybody. In fact, the human mind is highly associative. There's 2 that I think are extremely important to pay attention to: sequential and clustered. And I'm going to do it around a classic icon in my images, the cloud. Now, in a sequential set of associations, one word follows to another. So we might get from cloud to death, pretty far afield. In fact, this kind of association is great for getting a lot of ideas and going out to a lot of territories. But if you already know the kind of things you want to gestate on, you want to expand, a clustered kind of association can help a great deal. The graphic interface influences you. You put the seed in the center, and all words radiate out from it. You return back to that seed. It can be very helpful to go through that process. It's great to look for the goal, that 1 or 2 words that has that ring of truth. It's also useful to look for the pattern, the types of words that come up, and the associations that go through that. Those systems or that meta information can be equally important. And to watch how there's a kind of hierarchy between universally shared associations, conventional, culturally shared associations, environmental associations, we can include temporal things, and then down to that individual set of associations that probably nobody else would share, something that's quite unique. It's useful to help filter all of that out. I'll give you an example of how 2 words out of this list, heaven and breath, became a kind of working title for a series of images that I had been working on, and how it helped me develop it a little further. It was kind of a guiding principle that all of these images needed to have a certain quality to them, and they all related in a certain way. It wasn't ultimately the title I used, but it was a touchstone that I always returned to. And I didn't realize until much later how much it had influenced me, that it rekindled a lot of the early impressions that I'd had while looking at religious art as a young man. So those words can be extremely important. A couple of classic things to pay attention to in terms of brainstorming. This is really just kind of brainstorming. You can do all kinds of things like that. 1, don't censor. If it's not absurd, you haven't gone far enough. 2, don't judge. This is no time for the inner critic. It will shut down flow. Tell it has a role at the end of the process. Set a high quota. In order to get beyond the conventional mind, we have to get a lot of information. And a lot of this is just generating a lot of ideas, a lot of associations, a lot of images. So only move on when you've reached saturation, when you come up with the same thing again and again and again. Then it's time to stop and put the inner critic to use, analyze, look for the gold, sift, edit, find the patterns. So these are really kind of classic operations that we all go through in one way or another, and you can do it with far more than just words. Quick bit about writing, about drawing. I'm glad so many of you think that you can draw, and that's fantastic. What's so special about drawing? Well, drawings are great about iconic thinking. Can you imagine being in a foreign culture and trying to find the restroom without the icons on the doors, or navigating your computer screen or your cell phone without them? So my recommendation is to keep it simple. Yeah, we could learn to make drawings that might take us 20 hours. We might even take 20 minutes to make simpler drawings. But in fact, most of the time, after a lifetime of learning to draw, I'm drawing like this, something much simpler to work on ideas very quickly and to test a lot of ideas, to capture ideas. Human mind can only hold about 7 things at any one given time, and you've got a lot more going through that cranium of yours than any of that can hold. That's why we need memory devices like words and pictures and photographs to capture all of that. Drawing can also be great for finding essential structures. I often trace over my images and find, well, in this composition I've got 3 straight lines. In this composition I've got 3 straight lines. In this composition, I've also got 3 straight lines. I may be fixated. I may either be in a rut, or I may have something that I need to pursue a little bit further and refine more. And that's an interesting question. At what point does it become a rut? At what point does it become a groove? I think it's also helpful to just isolate the elements within that composition and to work with those a little more closely. In this case, I've actually taken the composition here and drawn over it. And I've drawn it in such a way that each of these items is individually isolated, and I can come in and move them around. Well, that leads me to think, well, what if I recombine them? Couldn't I create many drawings or many ideas from one if I isolate these and draw them a little bit more iconically and not so specifically, thinking about the generic mountain, not the specific mountain? I think you get into a lot more interesting territory. And from all of those, I find a lot of different combinations, including some new ideas to chase. What about the reflection of a mountain in this, which I've yet to find? But in many cases, I find that this enhances pattern recognition, that if you actually write these things down or draw these things out, you'll find them in your environment. I wrote this one down, ice and mountain, and found the combination. How about fog in Antarctica? I actually found it. I was lucky enough to find it. What if I did them all together and I found it? What I find is like you rent a car, it's red. Suddenly, everybody on the road is driving red cars. You find the pattern. And if you actually write these things down as significant, you'll enhance your pattern recognition. So draw, to find essentials, to isolate elements, to find new combinations, and to test variations. It really does enhance pattern recognition. It can also help with structuring thinking. Think of how many filmmakers use storyboards to structure their thinking in terms of putting together films. Finally, I want to come back to photography. What's so special about photographs? They excel at recording a great amount of detail in a really short amount of time. I can't see this level of detail with my naked eye, nor compare it to the next moment, or come back to it again and again and again. It's important to understand that the photograph, the camera eye, sees very differently than the human eye, and to understand those differences. When you're trying to look for great information or make great photographs, I find that it's important to just make a lot of them. One of the things that a lot of the colleagues that I share these stories with, all of us agree that about 1% of the images that we make actually see the light of day, and we actually want to show them and share them with other people. So make a lot of images. But don't just put your camera on auto motor drive and just make 100 images of the same one. Move, change your perspective. In fact, that's one definition of creativity. It creates a shift in perspective. And looking left or looking right offers a very different perspective. Looking close, looking far away, looking up, looking down. All of these from the same environment, very different perspectives. And if you actually walk with somebody and make images at the same time, you'll be able to compare your results and see that what they come up with is very different than what you've come up with. It's a wonderful learning experience. So I recommend that you really change your perspective frequently and think about really moving, working around an object. If you're photographing an object, work all 360 degrees. If you're photographing an environment, do all 360 degrees. Forget about the 180-degree rule. Cover them all. Really explore and experiment to try and find what's possible in any situation. You know, a lot of people talk about working outside the box, but I think it's really helpful to work the box. Just isolate the variables that are involved in any medium and push on them a little. Try and make planned experiments. Find out what each one does. This is a list of 26 experiments that have been ongoing for me, and it's been very useful. Now I photograph into the sun. I photograph multiple moments and layer together a new lighting situation. I'll even give myself permission to paint the effect of light with software as I would with paint, or to take images that were in totally different locations and create a new visual reality. Take things out to create something new, as I clone the cracks out of the mud. There really aren't any rules. They're just useful guidelines. And I think it's important to track your successes. When you break these rules, they often lead to breakthroughs. When you fail, that's also equally important. In fact, if you're not failing frequently, you're probably not trying hard enough. Dare to fail. The only failure is not learning from failure. If you fail the same time, the same way, again and again and again, well, maybe that's failure. But if you learn from your failure, well, that's evolving an idea. I want to leave you with a final thought that all of this can go together, that there's a kind of a synergy for all of this. I came up with this strange pair of words, floating stone. What do you mean? Stones sink. They don't float. What if they could? Days, weeks, months, I'm not sure, later, I woke up in the middle of the night with this idea of an image of a rock floating over a mountain peak. And I was lucky enough to have my materials on hand and quickly sketched it down. I woke up, was surprised by this thing, that's an interesting idea, mined my photo archive and produced this image, which later became one of my more successful images in the cover of my first book. It didn't go out exactly according to plan. The sky got a little more complex, these symmetrical mounds appeared. My point is that surprise is all along the way, that inspiration can happen at any moment if we're only alive to the process. And the main thing that I would say is be aware of your process. Just watch what the process does. To that effect, I strongly recommend that you play. Dare to be an amateur. Do things for the love of doing it, which is what the root of the word amateur means, to simply do things for the love of doing it. Be spontaneous, inquisitive, experiment. Play. Make fewer assumptions. I've been having a great time with my cell phone, just playing, photographing things I wouldn't ordinarily. And it's a great invitation to tune into the richness of the texture of my life. I also think it's useful to play with other people. I play with this little rascal, my son. If you really want to get back to that childlike state, get in touch with children, play with them. We make all kinds of surreal storyboards. And we have a great time. You never really know what's going to come up. So be childlike. Not childish, but childlike. For centuries, artists have championed that fresh perspective of the young mind. I know that artists like Picasso say it takes a long time to grow young. Yes, it may be challenging for us as adults as we learn to specialize and to deliver certain things, but I don't think it actually takes that long. I think all we need to do is get back in touch with what we already have within us and to reactivate that. With so many challenges that we often hear in these TED Talks facing us, and so many opportunities, what could be more important than reclaiming those creative resources, re-energizing that, and re-enlivening the world around us? I urge you to go out and make your contributions in your own unique and creative ways. Thank you.